Alrighty, everybody, welcome to another episode of Connecting the Pack. In today's conversation, I am joined by Ava Haddad. Ava is a graduate from NC State University's design program and is currently entering into healthcare, right?
hmm
Um, and today we will try to talk more about her interesting background, where she has some Lebanese heritage in addition to American heritage, and we'll try to explore some of her artwork and how that ties in to who she is as a person who's coming from this very interesting slash mixed background. So, Ava, welcome to the studio.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I'd love to start off with sort of understanding how you or why you chose to go into the design world, and sort of what inspired you or motivated you to kind of go into that. So maybe you
Mhm.
can walk us through the motivation that drove you to enter into the program.
Sure. So, I have been interested in art my entire life. From as early as I can remember, I've just loved it. I've loved any art form. It's always something that I found really fun. I've just always been very passionate about art and design. I did it a lot in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of oil pastel work and a lot of painting. And then as I was getting ready to apply to colleges, I figured I would go into design because art was such a huge part of my life, and I was like, okay, how can I make a career out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked a little bit into different design programs. Saw that State had a really great one, and I decided to apply to graphic design. There honestly wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to why I chose graphic specifically.
Okay.
I really didn't know much about it, and I'd never done any sort of like digital artwork. So I just, I was like, okay, this is like a practical form of design. I can make a career out of this, so why not?
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it. And then yeah, I switched from graphic design after about 2 years at State into just the art and design program. I found that graphic design was I don't know the right word. Well, first of all, a lot of it was very new, and I felt like I wasn't getting a lot of the support that I needed to
Mm-hmm.
like really properly learn um, like a lot of the tools, specifically like the Adobe suite.
Okay.
There was not a lot of guidance there, and that was, that's kind of the whole program. So it can be frustrating if you're trying to learn that and you're very new to it, and um, there's not a lot of support.
Yeah.
Um, and I was unsure at that point if I wanted to continue doing graphic design. I felt like it was a little too narrow for where I was at because I don't know, I felt like I hadn't explored other design careers enough to, feel confident in staying in that program. So I decided to switch to art and design. I felt that it was a little more open ended.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up taking some really cool classes. Well, I don't know if other people would say they're cool, but
Well, start naming those classes, then people will decide.
quilting.
Okay.
I took a quilting studio.
Yeah.
My Nana, she's a big quilter still, and she makes the most beautiful quilts. And I've always wanted to learn how to sew, so I was like, okay, let me do quilting, and it was a
Wow.
really cool experience. And then after that, I took another like fibers studio, and I ended up making a top, which was so fun and so challenging.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was a really cool experience, and I think it kind of helped me to get out of my head about design, just because I don't know, I felt kind of boxed in for a while, and I didn't really know what to do with that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
taking some um, different and maybe less structured studios really helped with that.
Yeah.
And I also did like animation, which was really cool.
Oh wow.
And then for my
Pixar.
that was intense. Lots of drawings, but for my final senior studio, I actually did a graphic design project as my capstone project.
Oh. Can you expand on that graphic design project? What was it about?
Yeah, so it was a website. So my minor was entrepreneurship in the arts, and throughout that minor, I did a series of projects, I guess, centered around this like hypothetical like art therapy company that like I created and had to write a business plan for. And so I had a lot of information like around that already. And I thought it would be cool to incorporate that into my final project and create a website like for this, hypothetical company.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no experience in website design. I've never done it before.
Yeah.
So I
don't
was
either.
like, yeah. So I was like, okay, I'll learn. It'll be a challenging experience, but hopefully I'll get a lot out of it. And I don't know, it'd also be cool to see the project that I had worked on, with the hypothetical company. Like it would be cool to see that kind of brought to life and see it visualized in a way.
Yeah.
So, and into that, like I incorporated a lot of illustration and just sketching and stuff, which felt really nice, to kind of have a balance between more like, I don't want to say rigid because it's not always rigid, but a balance between like just being able to get stuff out of my head and onto paper and, the style I want and the colors I want and,
Mm-hmm.
Create something that feels like me, balanced with something that would be very polished and professional and marketable.
Yeah.
So it was a cool project. And I'm glad that I chose to do that because I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah. So I want to maybe take a step back
Uh-huh.
here and ask you a couple of questions about. I want to pick up on a couple of things you mentioned.
Okay.
First off, I'm glad you took us through like a tour of your
Yeah.
couple of years that you spent in the program. That was great. We got to kind of see a snippet of how things were.
Yeah.
But I want to try to maybe ask you about the difference between quilting and sewing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have the knowledge to
Okay.
to like really differentiate between the two.
Right.
And I'm sure maybe some people listening to this, they might not know the
Yeah.
difference. So how can you maybe kind of simplify it to, someone who has not maybe kind of who isn't familiar with the difference between the two?
Right. So I would say quilting is maybe a form of sewing or something that you can do with
Mhm.
sewing. So there's, lots of different kinds of sewing. You can, hand stitch things. There's, I think embroidery would count in there. Obviously like using a sewing machine. And then, you can make a lot of different things. So we focused on like traditional quilts, like blankets.
Mm.
Wow.
Wow.
And yeah, which was really cool. We kind of learned about the history of quilts and, a lot of them used to be made from scraps of fabric. Just throughout history, that's how they've been made. Because, people didn't have a lot of money and they used what they had. And so I'd say like a defining feature of quilts is that it has a lot of layers.
Mhm.
So there's like, I guess there's 3 layers traditionally. So you have this like bottom piece of fabric, and then in the middle you have this, what do they call it? It's like a wool layer or like a cotton layer or almost like kind of foamy. There's a specific word.
Mm.
I can't think of it.
We can call it the midsection.
Yeah, the midsection. It's kind of,
Yeah.
it's the plushy part.
Okay.
And then you have your top part, which would be like your pattern part or your, it'll have your design on it. And so that's comprised of like a ton of tiny little squares or triangles or whatever shape you want to do that you've sewn together. And so you have to kind of, get all your layers and then put them on top of each other and then sew all of them together. So sew through all the 3 layers. And then you create like your border around it. So it's a lot of work.
Wow.
Like a lot of work.
And when you took the course, did you have to design one thing, or was it just multiple projects happening throughout, the semester?
Right. So we had several little projects. I'd say we started off with just kind of like quilt squares. So quilting squares are usually at least some of the traditional quilts are comprised of like 9 squares maybe. And each square has like a ton of different pieces in it. So it's kind of a way to like help organize your quilt and make it a little easier. So kind of like blocks that you work on at a time, and then you sew them all together. So we started off just learning how to sew, like using a sewing machine, and then working on like the quilting squares, and then we kind of worked our way up to it. Like our final project, my professor was like, you can do whatever you want with this, but you need to create some sort of quilts. And most of us did like traditional quilts. We just chose a style that we liked. Like I was inspired by a kind of quilt called just an art quilt. And
art quilt?
Yeah, that's very open-ended, but I wanted a piece that was not very like functional for warmth.
Right.
I wanted something I could like put on my wall.
Is that what they call avant-garde? Like the type of design that's just
kind of
art for the sake of art?
Yeah, art for the sake of art. Yeah, absolutely. And so I wanted to kind of we were very encouraged to use traditional aspects of quilting and really learn about their tradition, because it's such a huge tradition. And it's so, I don't know, it's such a cool thing and such a, I don't know, it's an awesome thing that women have been doing forever. But so, yeah, she wanted us to, do traditional stuff and then put our own spin on it and get a little creative, get a little funky.
What was your spin?
So I cut chunks out of my quilt.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know how to say that. So I created kind of windows in my quilt, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just a couple. And I also did like kind of a raw, like ruffled border, if that makes sense, on one of the sides. So like I had a finished border on like 3 out of 4 sides, and then the 4th was just kind of like raw fabric. And then all of the fabric that I used, I thrifted. So I found it secondhand.
Right. 'Cause it could get pretty expensive, like when you're going shopping for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, yeah, I cut out chunks of my quilt and I created little windows with sheer fabric in the cutouts. So I found this like multicolored sheer fabric, and I like sewed it into the windows. It was a difficult endeavor. I don't know. I don't really know how I did it, but
wow, but you did it.
Yeah, I did it.
Gosh, now I feel like I'm gonna have to see an image of that to kind of put things into like
perspective. I can show you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, this is fascinating. And then you also mentioned a top that you designed. So that would be, was that sewing? Also?
So it was actually quilted top.
Oh, wow.
So both. I mean, I would say it's all sewing. Like quilting is a form of sewing. Because, that's what you're doing to create the quilts. So this top, I've never designed clothes before. I've never made clothing before, but I decided that that's what I was going to do. And so I kind of created my own patterns. I have a bad habit of winging things a lot.
When it comes to design?
Yeah, when I shouldn't. Both. Yeah. I was very loose with my measurements, which probably wasn't a great idea, but it
Yeah.
worked. It worked out.
Oh, nice.
And at the end of the day, it could fit me. I still have it. I can wear it. It fits me. I'm really happy with it. And yeah, I quilted. So in my top, it was only 2 layers. I did not include the like plushy middle layer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a thicker, like a white denim material for the inside. And then the outside, again, I thrifted all of my fabrics. And I decided on my color scheme and my design. And I quilted the outside and then attached it to the inside. And then I had to sew all of the pieces together. So.
Would that be considered like a cumbersome process? Like very.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's,
Wow.
again, I don't know how I did it. I could not recreate
You
it.
improvised.
Yeah, I just, I tend to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
That's a good question. A little over a year ago.
Wow.
That was, or yeah, maybe exactly a year ago, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was spring semester last year.
So when you were, whether it be this top that you designed or another project that you worked on, what kind of keeps you? What sort of zone do you think is most optimal when it comes to working on these projects? Like, is there a particular environment where you feel like, oh gosh, the ideas are pouring. I feel like I'm there, present, and I'm
Right.
working on this project, and I think it is going in the right direction.
Right.
So, is there throughout the years, is that something that you discovered or perhaps gradually started to understand more about, or was it always there? You knew what environment you should be in, you knew what sort of zone you should be in, kind of involved in, and what can you tell me about this?
So I feel like it's been the same for me for most of my life. Starting maybe in high school when, I would have art class just for, it'd be like an hour-long period. And then, I ended up having like 4-hour-long studios in college. And
Wow, 4 hours?
yeah, which during those, I will say I don't know, I feel like I didn't get much done like during studio as much as just going in there on my own time. I think with any project I'm working on, whether it's for school or just, my own thing,
Yeah.
I definitely have to kind of get in a zone. It's definitely a mental zone. I kind of just, hyperfixate on whatever I'm working on, and that's how I get like the most progress done, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, usually I'll, for lack of better term, like be in the zone for, an hour or 2 or maybe 3. And I'll just kind of like, I'll be listening to music and I'll just kind of be working on it for as long as I can straight. And then, I'll like kind of look up, take a breath, and I'm like, okay, it's been 2 hours. Like, okay.
Yeah, you need a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, that's enough. And then I'll forget about it and then come back to it and do the same thing. So I've learned that I really don't get much done if I'm just like, oh, I have half an hour, I can sit down and work on this painting or work on like that. To me, I'm like, that's pointless, which sounds kind of silly, but just personally, it's better if I can kind of like, it's almost like a ritual, like I kind of get into my mindset, I get whatever I need to be comfortable. I kind of have to have a space where I can tune everything out and just focus on what I'm doing.
That is fascinating. I mean, when you talk to maybe writers, you get to, some people would tell you, especially, scholars or people in the academic world, they would tell you that they have to retreat. They would have to go to a particular spot that is quiet, that is away from everyone and everything.
Right.
And that's when the ideas just start pouring. And that's when they can get creative with whatever piece that they're working on.
Yeah.
So kind of detached from all the noise, right? So, but it's interesting that you mentioned you would listen to music.
Yeah.
You know, so you're
Yeah.
kind of bringing in that noise,
Right.
and you're designing, you're working
Mhm.
on the project. Has that always also been the case, or were there times when a quiet environment is most optimal?
Yeah. So for me, I honestly, I've always loved music. I'm sure a lot of people, most people love music, but
Hmm.
for me, I get most my best ideas and my most creative thinking like while I'm listening to music.
Yeah.
And I also create playlists for everything. So, like for example, okay, so I studied abroad this past summer, in Florence, Italy.
Yeah.
And I have been working on a painting, just while I've been home, like around my experience while I was there.
While
Um,
you were in Italy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I call it kind of like I've been doing these brain dump paintings lately where I just um, kind of pour out everything I can
Hmm.
ar- ar- around like a certain situation or time period or like, whatever want the subject of the painting to be. So, I have certain colors that come to mind that I want to incorporate or certain images. And yeah, so um I had a playlist that I listened to all summer while I was there. And that's kind of the playlist that I was listening to as I was like kind of drafting this painting and kind of deciding what I wanted to include in it. And then I actually created a new playlist like specifically for while I was working on this painting.
Okay.
Um, and it was kind of, I pulled a lot from the OG playlist, and then I added some things, just because, you know, um, I don't know. It's literally just all in my head, like the vibe of for lack of a better term, the vibe,
Hmm.
of my painting versus like, experiencing everything in real life, that I did last summer. Um, there is some difference, and I wanted like my mindset to reflect that, like my mindset like reflecting back on my summer versus like being there and experiencing it is different and it feels different.
Hmm.
And so I needed like a playlist that felt different for
Right.
if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
I know. I
No,
know.
no, this is incredible, because
Yeah.
I never really thought that I would talk to someone who would tell me that, music is what I need to get,
Yeah.
creative or like
Yeah.
work on this project.
Right.
So it is, I guess for me, it's it's a new sort of idea that I'm kind of contemplating right now,
Right.
and, further understanding.
Yeah.
But do you do you ever think there's um do you hit something called, maybe, well, in the writer's world, go to writer's block,
Mhm.
but is there something in the art world where you feel like, oh, I don't feel like I feel like I'm kind of being blocked
Mhm.
right now, and I need to step away and do
Absolutely.
something? Okay.
Yeah.
So how
Absolutely.
would you describe that experience? Or if there's an example you
Um
can mention, that would also be helpful.
Frustrating. um so I actually experienced that a ton the first couple years of college.
Mm.
Up until like probably mid junior year, I just was so well, first of all, I didn't have a lot of free time to like focus on my own art. It was all designing for school. And then I think I was so frustrated with that aspect of it, and it took all my creative energy to like do my projects for school. And then um it was a form of design that was so different than what I was used to, um, like back in high school and stuff. So I don't know. For a while, I just felt really defeated,
Mm-hmm.
and it made me feel really bad about myself, actually, because I think so much of my self image and like my external image is like, okay, I am an artist, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I wasn't creating what I wanted to be creating, and I wasn't like um I don't know, I wasn't able to like express myself in that way during that time. And so I honestly felt like a fraud. I was like, I have everyone in my life is like, oh, oh, like Ava's the artist. She's the artist. You know, she always is doing art. And I would be like, yeah, I'm always doing art. And I just wasn't doing art.
Right.
I felt, I don't know, made me feel so bad about
Yeah.
myself. It sounds so silly, but it's true. I had a really hard time with that. And then I was able to just kind of start getting out of that a little bit junior year. I think a lot of, and I think this is a very common thing that a lot of artists or just artsy people experience.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, obviously your art is very personal, whatever form it is. And it's, you know, like when you're putting something out there for other people to see, it's like, all of it, you know, it's coming from your brain. Like
Right.
it's in a way it's you personified or you like visualized.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very personal and it's very vulnerable. And so I know I always put a lot of pressure on myself to like, you know, everything had to be perfect before people could see it. Like and I also did a ton of realism in high school. So I was like, everything has to be really perfect before
Mm-hmm.
anyone, you know, it has to look
Yeah.
real before anyone can see it. And I think kind of breaking out of that mindset is what I had to do in order to like get over my artist block, if you will.
Right.
And I remember when I kind of, you know, had a moment with myself. I was like, I can't, like, I need to like start making art again or like doing something. Like I was like, I don't know, I just feel crazy right now.
Yeah.
And so I started with just like making, like trying to take the pressure off of myself to
Mm-hmm.
create something like good and just create something and not worry about how it looked, not worry about if it was good, not worry about showing people.
Yeah.
Just like stupid little sketches and stuff like that. And I think that's really what kind of snapped me out of it. I can say now that I am in the best place that honestly, I feel like I'm in the best place I've ever been with my
Wow.
art.
That is
Um,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
just because you know, like I mentioned earlier, I've been doing these brain dump paintings where I just like, it's literally a brain dump. Like I just pull things from my mind, whatever comes to mind, I write it down. I, you know, find some way to visualize it, and then I just get it out on paper. And, you know, I do mixed media pieces. I paint on it. I use my pastels. I draw. I use pen. I use markers. Just kind of whatever I want to do, and I don't
Yeah.
like box it in any way. And that's felt really good. It just, I don't know. Um, it feels like I'm being like very true to myself and to the kind of work that I've always wanted to create. And yeah, sorry, I forgot the original question.
No,
I
that was
don't even know where we started.
no. You were on point. No, you were trying to describe just how, you know, I was asking about this creative block,
Yeah.
and it's a very interesting take on it, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to maybe further, maybe go back actually to
Mm-hmm.
something that was interesting that you mentioned, which was how you were referred to as the artist,
Yeah.
but I think you would consider yourself more. You're a person that creates art.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you're a person first. You know, the art comes later,
Right.
right? And, and I think that's a good sort of opening to who you are as a person,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, having a little bit of Lebanese background, having that American background as
Yeah.
well. You know, there's this fusion of cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder if that sort of fusion or maybe connection to both of these cultures has had any impact or influence
Mm-hmm.
on who you are as a person that creates art.
Right.
You know, so that is something that you know, I think about and
Mm-hmm.
figured maybe you have something to say about, and I think it would be interesting to maybe explore.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So Yeah, I guess to elaborate. So my dad, he is half Lebanese, and he grew up in Lebanon. My grandma on that side, she was like born and raised in the South, North Carolina. And then my grandpa is from Lebanon,
Mm-hmm.
and they met. They had my dad and my aunt, and my dad grew up living in Lebanon until he was 16. And then on my mom's side, so she was like born and raised tiny town in North Carolina, very southern. And both of her parents were from here. So I've got a lot of like southern roots.
Mm-hmm.
And um, yeah, I've always loved both sides of my family heritage. And I think my parents have always done a really great job of making sure that, we know where we come from and that we feel connected to it in some way.
Right.
And I think um, the biggest way I'm connected to my Middle Eastern heritage is definitely like through food. We just get a ton. I know,
I
but
love
yeah,
Middle Eastern.
no, it's actually the best. I know I'm biased, but I grew up eating a lot of Lebanese food and just Middle Eastern food in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I was raised on both my grandparents. My nana and my teta. Both of them would make fried chicken, and then we'd have that alongside like tabbouleh,
Wow, what an
which
interesting mix.
yeah, which like my grandpa would make, and I don't know, it was the best. I was
Wow.
so lucky to get to experience that and just I don't know have the best food ever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's hilarious.
I know.
Fried chicken and fattoush.
Oh
Or
yeah,
tabbouleh, yeah.
yeah, or fattoush, yeah, both,
Okay.
both, yeah.
And for context, this is another salad, folks.
Yes, both salads.
Wow. And,
Yeah.
and I think that is also quite fascinating how, you have that connection there, but I think for most of your life, or maybe your entire life, aside from maybe visits abroad,
Mhm.
you've lived here,
Yeah.
in the United States.
Yep.
Wow. And like when someone asks you, like who who you are, like
Mhm.
who like what, like when someone tries to understand who you are as a person,
Mhm.
like do you answer by saying, or is it contextual? Like you answer by saying, I'm American and with Lebanese heritage or Lebanese
Mhm.
sort of connection, or is it just American, or how do you, answer that question?
That's a good question. I'd say most of the time, like, I mean, obviously looking at me, people are like, "Oh, that's a white girl. She's from North Carolina." Just basic, whatever. Which I am. It's
Right.
true.
Yeah.
And Middle Eastern people technically are white too, so I'd say, that's just who I am. But yeah, I'd say, I'm American first, and then I've also got Lebanese heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm about a third Lebanese.
Oh, third.
We don't really know how the genetics did that. We all figured we were like a fourth, and then my aunt did the ancestry testing, and it turns out like me and my siblings and my cousins, we're all a third. So I guess
wow.
that was pretty strong genes. But
Yeah. A lot
so
of Lebanese in you.
right. So yeah, I used to kind of minimize it more and be like, oh, like that doesn't count, but it does, and that's a pretty significant amount of my my heritage and who I am. And it was such an important thing growing up. It's like my last name. It's Haddad. It's that's a Lebanese name, and my middle name is Michael. I share it with all of my siblings. That's my dad's first name.
Oh.
And that's a Middle Eastern tradition. All your kids have the father's name as their middle name.
Right.
And so yeah,
Ava
that's
Michael.
Yeah, Ava Michael. Yeah.
Okay.
I know I used to like be embarrassed by that when I was little because it's like, oh, it's a boy's name. But now I love it. I wouldn't change a thing. And I think it's so special that I share that with my siblings too.
Right. Wow. And you have had experience in Italy, and I remember talking to a lot of people in Lebanon who, when they visit Italy,
Yeah.
they tell me that, man, it's just the culture is kind of similar in a sense that
Mm-hmm.
we're chill, we're laid back. You know,
Right.
it feels like it's like Lebanon but more refined.
Right.
And I get
Yeah.
that so many times from the
Yeah.
people that go to Italy. You know, and I remember even talking to like the head of the Lebanese studies or Lebanese Diaspora Studies Center
Mm-hmm.
here on campus, and he's Lebanese and he's Lebanese American. He lived for many years in Lebanon, and then he immigrated to the United States.
Yeah.
And he's been to Italy, and that's like
Mm-hmm.
a similar testimony
Yeah.
that I've received. So, yeah, I mean, but I wonder when you went there. I mean, if you felt like, man, this kind of feels a little bit similar to how it is, how the culture kind of it's similar to my
Mm-hmm.
Lebanese culture, or the people that I'm surrounded with that have some sort of Lebanese
Right.
heritage.
Right. So I would say, again, it all goes back to food
Hmm.
and just how I grew up. So I'd say my dad's a big foodie, for lack of a better term. And he, that's kind of how we were raised. Again, we were very lucky to have such, both my parents are really great cooks. And they've always cooked like delicious and healthy meals for us. And so we were raised on, like when I was teething as a baby, we used to have a wooden garlic masher, and my parents would give us the garlic masher to like chew on while we were teething. So
That's so cute.
yeah, I bet we had
Wow.
horrible breath. But
Right.
so we were I was very lucky to be exposed to so many different foods, and to me that's a huge part of community and family.
Mhm.
I feel like on both sides of my family, it's this, even like the southern roots too, it's very centered around food,
Yeah.
and kind of coming together, especially like the women on the southern side. It's traditionally like the women are in the kitchen and they're cooking, and that's when you have community time, and that's
Mhm.
like just being there with your family and cooking together. And then on my dad's side, like my dad and my grandpa are the ones that cook. So
Wow.
which I've always loved. I'm like, okay, yeah,
like
that's
that.
how, as they should.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the men are in the kitchen when
Roles have
I'm
switched.
when I'm at my grandparents' house. So
That's very interesting to kind of see.
Yeah.
Play out
I
in real
know.
time.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
Wow.
But going back to like my experience in Italy and stuff. So also while traveling, my parents think traveling's really important.
Mhm.
And again, I've been very fortunate to be able to travel a lot throughout my life.
And you mentioned you've been twice to Italy.
Yes, I've
Yeah.
been to Italy twice. I went when I was 16, and then I went last summer.
Mhm.
And I was with my whole family when I was 16. And I know specifically for my dad, whenever we travel, big emphasis on food. Like we look for the little hole in the wall places, and we try to find the craziest stuff, and we try to find the like dinky little restaurants where there's two people running the whole place, and
yeah.
it's quiet, there's no one in there. We're like, this is a place with the good food. And
He's not kidding.
yeah, and it's always true. But yeah, I think that mindset, and then I'd say like cuisine wise, both are like very olive oil heavy, and
Mhm.
like if you look at like authentic Italian food and stuff, there are a lot of similarities, just like fresh
Yeah.
whole foods and healthy oils, and I'd say Italian food has a lot more dairy.
Mm.
But yeah, so there are definitely similarities there, just in the cuisines. And then the emphasis on family and the emphasis on community and
Yeah.
community through food, and sitting down, and like my parents, when they like to travel and when we travel with them, when we have dinner, we don't just sit down and eat and okay, run off. We sit and we chat,
Mhm.
and we talk, the whole family, for a long time. And growing up, like, we were not allowed to eat on our own. Like, it was family dinner every night.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. And I was always
Right.
shocked when I was like, I'd hear that other people didn't do that, and I was like, oh
Yeah. It's not
man,
that
like
common.
we were not,
Especially not in here.
yeah, I had no idea. I was like, we were not allowed to, no phones, nothing.
Right.
We sat and we talked with each other and talked about our days and our lives. And so I'm sure that, part of that comes from the differences in my parents' backgrounds. And so that's definitely, those are some parallels between, things in Italy, and which I'm, not an expert or anything, but, just what I've experienced and seen.
Well, when I'd love to maybe go back a little bit to your trip in Florence and painting. You mentioned you were there this past summer.
Yes.
And there was a lot of, it was a painting program.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was that sort of experience that was kind of art focused different from the experience you've had when you were 16? Were you kind of seeing things differently? Were you kind of viewing the world from a different lens?
Yeah.
How would you maybe describe that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, definitely from the perspective, I was there by myself, and I was there with one of my best friends, and I was an adult there. So a lot more independent, kind of exploring the city. Like, I was without my mom and dad, and
Right.
it was weird, but it was fun. And so there was that aspect of it. And then from an art standpoint, yeah, I would say, like, I think just in general, as someone that does art, I do look at things a lot of times, and I try to think of, like, like when I'm sightseeing, I'm like, oh, like that would make a good painting. Or like, I'll take photos specifically to paint them later.
Yeah.
Or like, I'll see things happen in real time, and I'll like write it down and be like, that should go into something, like, I don't know what it's going to go into, but
Yeah.
it needs to be in something. Or like, even just how I'm feeling during a certain experience. Like I'll write it down in my notes app and be like, this is what's happening right now. And like, maybe I'm listening to a song and I'm like, oh, like this just makes me like feel this very specific thing. And so I'll write it down so that maybe I can like, so I can like hope to capture it later.
Yeah.
And half the time I don't, I forget about these things, but, yeah, I definitely, do find myself, noticing things from, I guess, an artist's perspective in a way. Even if it's just like colors, like looking at something being like, oh, those are really great colors.
Yeah.
They need to be in a painting.
Like this Lego set we have in front of us right now.
Yeah. And so I'll go through my camera roll later, and I'll be like, why did I take a picture of this like piece of trash or something? or like this like spot of rust, or it's because I liked the colors.
Right.
So
no, that's such an artist thing to
yeah,
say,
I know.
right?
It's ridiculous.
Oh, wow, that is really fascinating, because I don't think I have that sense. Like it's not something. I'm not sure if it's acquired or if it's in like
I don't know.
built
Yeah.
in you in a way. Like I can maybe with clothes, maybe I can like sense things and look at what matches, what doesn't, what sort of colors work,
Right. Yeah.
But like a general view of the world from an artist's lens, I think it takes an artist to have that view.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't know. That's that's something I've wondered about before.
Yeah.
I think skills, obviously, like anyone can learn a skill, and to be a good painter or drawer, or like have good technical skills, like you do have to practice them, and they are learned things. Like no one's just born like being able to, I mean, well, maybe some people are, I don't know, but throughout my whole life is how I've like built up my skills and stuff. But I think seeing things a certain way, I don't know. I think some people definitely are just, people do have like an eye for stuff.
Yeah.
And I've never like, I don't know, I've never like considered myself to, but I've been told that I do, mainly like by my mom. Like she's so sweet. She's the best. But
Shout out to your mom.
yeah, shout out to my mom. She's
I mean, the entire
Mom, you're the
family. I mean-
best. Yeah, she's the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, my whole fam. But she's always told me, you know, she sees things in such a beautiful way. And you know, hopefully some of that's rubbed off on me. And you know, I've been told that by her before. That, you know, I see things in a different way than
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people would, or I don't know. And I don't know what to accredit that to. I don't know if it's just because I've kind of trained my eye to pick up on certain things
Yeah.
because I'm thinking about art in the back of my mind, or I don't know. But yeah,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, like it happens with music too. So I don't know. It's a weird thing to like talk about. I've never really, I don't know. I don't think about it much.
Sorry,
I'm
I
just
had
kinda,
to put you in the spot there.
no, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think about it. It just
Mhm.
kind of,
It's kind of natural for
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Like you never vocalized it before. You never put it
No.
into words.
No,
it
I
just
haven't.
is.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just how my mind works, I guess. And I don't know. I don't know if it's like unique or maybe everyone does this. I don't know.
No,
Just-
I could
that's-
personally say
yeah.
I don't have sort of artist lens turned
Yeah.
on 24/7
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my brain. But yeah, I'd love to kind of wrap things up and you
Sure.
know, I'm just fascinated by the work that you've done and you know the stories that you've shared. This is
Mm-hmm.
incredible. I want to ask you a final question here.
Sure.
What would you say to your first year designer Ava?
Oh gosh.
Now that you are, now that you've graduated and you have maybe different perspective, and you feel
Right.
like you said, you're in the best place that maybe the best place that you've ever been in.
Yeah.
In recent years.
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably like get over yourself. Get on anxiety meds.
Oh no.
But no. I would say yeah, it's not that deep. It's not that serious. Just make stuff. You
Mhm.
know, just kind of again like get over yourself. It's not everything has to be perfect or presentable. And just be more open to learning new styles and to to seeing things in a different way.
Yeah. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ava, for joining me. I really enjoyed this
Yeah.
conversation.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.